in the administration. He thinks it was the right thing for the National Security Advisor to resign. He may have misspoken, though. He said that the president asked for his resignation. I do not believe that is the case. We've been told.
He also said that as soon as the president found out about this, you know, he made sure that he resigned. And the timeline that we have in terms of when the White House knows that is murky at best, because they were told by the Department of Justice more than 2 weeks ago.
Let's bring back our panel right now. I want to start with Ryan Lizza from the New Yorker. Ryan, you know, we've been here before where House Speaker Paul Ryan is asked to justify something that the president has done or not done. Today, you know, while he said that the National Security Advisor should go or should be gone, he did not seem to go that next step to say that there is more information that we need that the Republican-led House will pursue in trying to figure out what happened here.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that was the key news in that he did not commit to any sort of investigation. And just to follow up with what Poppy said, Speaker Ryan said that as soon as the White House lost confidence in the National Security Advisor, that's when well, he said he asked for his resignation. The White House says he offered his resignation. That's when, you know, the parting of ways happened. As Poppy points out, the timeline, that's not quite right. The timeline is that on January 12th, David Ignatius in the Washington Post first reported that Flynn may have spoken to the Russian ambassador about sanctions, and then in subsequent follow-up questions to the White House, that's when we got these denials. Then, of course, in late January, the acting attorney general talked to the White House counsel and said that Flynn may be vulnerable to blackmail because he lied to Pence and perhaps others. So they had to have started to look into this on January 12th and investigate it. They had the transcripts. They are the White House. They had the transcripts of Flynn's conversations with this ambassador. Certainly by late January, when the acting attorney general was telling them, hey, guys, he lied, they knew this. So I don't think it's accurate that they parted ways because he lied. I think they finally accepted his resignation because it became a big, explosive news story, thanks partly to Adam's great reporting.
Let's take a moment, guys, and listen to some new comments from Republican Congressman Peter King of New York. He just spoke to Manu Raju. He went further than Ryan Lizza did, than Paul Ryan did on this. Listen.
Do you think that the public has a right to know whether or not the president directed Mike Flynn to talk about sanctions with the Russian ambassador?
I think that should be asked of the president. Again, it should be a question of executive privilege. The fact is, I think the president should discuss, what he knows and what happened.
You do? You think he should divulge that?
To the extent, again, you're always talking about diplomacy, you're talking about some sensitive issues, but for the most part, I think it's important for the president to, lay out what happened, yeah.
We just got Manu Raju up. He was obviously in that briefing. Manu, you're with us. I mean, Peter King does go further than Paul Ryan did.
Yeah, he did. And that was part of what I was trying to get Paul Ryan to say when I asked him, does he think the American public deserves to know whether or not Donald Trump, when he was president-elect, instructed Mike Flynn to talk about the issue of sanctions with the Russia ambassador? And Ryan chose to answer it a different way, saying that he believes that it was the right decision that Mike Flynn resigned, that he believes that he considers himself, Paul Ryan, a Russia hawk, and he understands why that the new administration believes it could have better relations with Russia, but not addressing that question about what the president of the United States may have known and whether he should actually explain to the public exactly what he told Mike Flynn. Now, he was asked a follow-up question by me and others here about whether Congress should investigate, and he said, I don't want to prejudge anything. So the Speaker does not want to provoke a fight with the new administration, and it comes as Democrats are pushing very hard for an independent investigation aside from what's already happening here in Congress. The House Intelligence Committee is one of the committees that is looking into the broader Russia issue, but just moments ago, Congressman Devin Nunes, who's the chairman of that committee said that those discussions between Flynn and Trump would not be covered by their investigation because of executive privilege. So it's not clear exactly the scope of this investigation, whether it'll get into that. But on the other side of the chamber, some Senate Republicans are suggesting that they will go a bit further, telling our colleague Phil Mattingly, Richard Burr, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, saying that Flynn should testify in front of his committee to discuss what happened. Probably happened in a classified setting, but at least that they plan to look into that aspect of Flynn's discussions with Russia. So we're seeing this play out here on Capitol Hill, but probably not as much as some Democrats expect for more calls for that independent bipartisan investigation, Poppy and John.
So, Alice Stewart, House Speaker Paul Ryan, as Mona was just saying there, says he doesn't want to prejudge the circumstances of the conversation between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador and what President Trump and then President-elect Trump knew about it. He doesn't want to prejudge the circumstances, but at the same time, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, David Nunes, says he's not going to investigate the conversation what the president knew. Jason Chaffetz, the chair of the House Oversight Committee, says, you know what, he's going to let this work itself out, too. He's not going to investigate it. So, you know, the speaker may say he doesn't want to prejudge the circumstances, but he's not going to ask anyone to go find out what those circumstances are.
I do agree with him. We don't want to prejudge the situation. We don't need to get ahead of our skis and point blame where it doesn't lie. But we do need to have some questions answered. I think Peter King is right. I think the president does need to come forth with what he knew about what happened. And look, we all understand this administration. We've had alternative facts and now incomplete information, and their runway is very short when it comes to clarifying what happened here. And I think it's perfectly understandable for people to have questions. Whether or not a full investigation comes of this is yet to be determined, but I don't think bunker mentality with regard to dealing with this is the way to go.
I mean, Alice, if you want to find out the circumstances, someone's got to man up and do the investigation.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm saying, that would probably be the best way to do it and put the information out on the table, because that's the best way from a communication standpoint. We're going to be able to put this behind us. And, clearly many people here in Washington are hesitant to go ahead and make a statement that they will have an investigation. But in my view, given the history of how this unfolded, I think as much information as they can put on the table is the best and quickest way to put them behind this and talk about what I think was the actual more very important to the American people is the Obamacare situation that they tried to focus on this morning. But clearly that's being overshadowed by this bigger story.
Well, this is certainly in the news. This is all the headlines. Ryan, listen to you, though. Why then, if an investigation needs to happen, and Peter King went much further than Paul Ryan did, Paul Ryan just seemed to say, well, there's already a committee that's investigating this, and the House Intelligence Committee is already looking into this and the broader issue with Russia.
Yeah, I think that they just, like the White House, they're hoping that the resignation sort of takes care of this piece of the whole Russian investigation, and that they don't want to be overly focused on some of the questions we've been batting around here. The most important one of which is that, the famous question that often gets asked of presidents when one of their staffers does something wrong. What did the president know, and when did he know it? And I think they're in the same party, and there's a little bit of protecting going on. And just to back up a little bit, I want to go back to something that Alice said before. It is true that there might be a completely innocent explanation that Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador, as any incoming national security advisor does, and there's no necessarily any scandal here. And then the scandal is only that he did lie to his superiors about it. The reason that people are suspicious that something else is going on is from the evening that Obama announced the sanctions on December 29th. The next 12 to 24 hours, the entire Russian government said that they were going to respond in kind. The foreign minister's spokesperson, Vladimir Putin's personal spokesperson, all of the Twitter feeds of the Russian government, you can go back and look at all of this, they all said, we will not tolerate this. We're going to respond in kind to these sanctions. And then that was the same period that Flynn is talking to the Russian ambassador. And then lo and behold, the next day, early in the morning in Washington, the afternoon in Moscow, Putin puts out a statement and says, I've decided against all of that. I'm not retaliating. I'm just going to wait for the new Trump administration to take office and deal with all of this then. So that is the sort of mysterious change in posture of the Russian government that led U.S. investigators to go back and say, wait a second, why did they flip on this? And that's what led them to the conversations between Flynn and the ambassador. So I just wanted to throw that out so viewers understand why this is so suspicious.
Mm-hmm. And again, did the president know, or the president-elect know at the time?
The president tweeted the next day, great move, basically, by Vladimir Putin.
And that's why those questions are being asked. Guys, stick around, a lot more to discuss. Let's go to Capitol Hill. We find CNN congressional correspondent Phil Mattingly there. Phil, you've been speaking to members. You have some new reaction. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think one of the wild cards here as we try and figure out who will be looking into what, or if anybody will be looking into anything at all, is the Senate Intelligence Committee. And they already announced in a bipartisan fashion they have launched an investigation into Russian meddling into the U.S. election. And included in the explicit mandate, guys, of that investigation is looking into contacts between campaigns and Russian intelligence officials. I just spoke to Mark Warner. He's the vice chair, a Democrat from Virginia, of that committee. And he told me explicitly he believes Mike Flynn now needs to come up and testify in front of the committee as part of that investigation. Now, why does that matter? Well, the committee has subpoena power, and they've made very clear that they are willing to use it. It would need Republican sign-off to do that. I think that's kind of the big question here. But in terms of who's looking into this, how much power do they have? If there's a real investigation, one that may have teeth, it's the Senate Intelligence Committee and the top Democrat, the